Zoom, Teams, Skype, YouTube, Hopin, Event Cadence, AirMeet, Remo, SpotMe, and on and on and on. How do you begin the process of choosing the right platform? What should you look for when you do a demo with one of these guys? Why is now absolutely a great time to jump in, to dive into experimentation? How are virtual events affecting the environment? These are just some of the topics that we cover today in part 2 of my conversation with Chloe Mandell. We also have resources for those of you who are just joining the virtual events journey, because you have not missed the boat. Now is actually a great time to begin learning how to produce events online. This half hour is packed full of great insights and knowledge, so please get ready to take some more notes. This is Jason Greenman, you're listening to Breakouts, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Chloe Mandell. Speaking about the platforms and this event, I know you don't want to endorse anything specific, and originally there were not that many, it seemed like, but over the last 6 months, it just feels like there's dozens or hundreds that are suddenly available. And I mean, what would you say are some of the key things you look for from a virtual events platform?
Yeah, no, there actually are hundreds. I've been tracking it with a friend. So for real, there's certain ones that are definitely kind of raising to the top, either due to quality or great marketing.
Okay.
But I always start when I'm working with clients, so that whoever's hosting the event, to ask them kind of just, okay, never mind the tech, what programming elements do you want? So say they absolutely want breakouts, right?
Okay.
They absolutely want and everything down to the detail, right? Do you want to be able to bring someone in on video from the audience? Though everything you list out kind of in that really detailed vision is a tech component. And so it almost helps you create a individualized RFP in a way where you can then know, like, I need X, Y, and Z capability. And then you find the tech that can do that. You might need to start to layer tech into what is known in tech terms as a tech stack. So there are a lot of platforms out there that are offering an all-in-one solution. And so, just some people have different opinions around that of like, can you do everything well? But then there, again, there's that ease, if you have an integrated platform with registration, with automated marketing, with, actual its own integrated live streaming, then that could make it easy for you. So, I also really encourage people when picking a virtual event platform to think from every person's perspective. So obviously, number one, attendee, right? Making sure their experience is great. They're the ones paying, but guess who else is paying? Sponsors. So really looking at event platforms from a sponsor's perspective. Where do they show up? Where are there logo banner opportunities throughout the quote unquote venue, for example? This is one reason why, if you just do an event through Zoom, you have to get quite creative in how you have a sponsor show up versus a more kind of almost like landing page that these virtual event platforms offer. In addition, never forget about your speakers. So their point of view is going to be a little bit more like you, the organizer, and what is the back end support like for them when they're talking, and if there's a glitch, how are they communicating that to you? So I have seen some platforms take the speaker's perspective really, really seriously, and I actually enjoy that because essentially, again, what an event is, going back to that original question, the speakers are your content. So making sure they feel confident, making sure that their presentations are on point, high quality, actually really is important. And last but not least, don't forget about yourselves. I'm certainly willing to sacrifice a lot and kind of like a lot of these workarounds and, back end challenges to make sure that the front end audience, doesn't even know what's going on behind the curtain, per usual. But thinking of from those 4 perspectives can help you start to whittle down which platform's working for you. We've already talked about the engagement needs. So what I have seen kind of, essentially, I see a couple different splits happening in virtual event platforms. First and foremost is budget. So reviewing what budget you have to work with. Maybe you have, maybe you're moving an event that would have been on site to virtual. You might have some leftover budget that was going to be used for that venue, that was going to be used for food and beverage. So all of a sudden, $10,000 is nothing compared to the 100,000 or, several 100,000 you would have been spending. And so definitely you're seeing kind of I would generally say like, the under 8,000 and the above 8,000 is kind of the split I see. A lot of people come in, maybe with that $5,000 budget, and that's about what you should expect to pay for these all-inclusive sort of more economical virtual event platforms. Right. And then, I already mentioned, do you need registration included? Are you using, talk about your tech stack, are you using a second source for registration? Maybe you already have one integrated with your membership program, for example. Do you need marketing automation? A lot of this can be nice if it works seamlessly and people that register are automatically plugged in to fill out a profile and then their profile pops up on the page. That's quite easy. But if you're not using an all-inclusive platform, you're going to have to do some uploads. So when this is also really key, beyond demos, certainly you can attend, a quick 20-minute demo. It's not going to nearly show you enough of what you need to know to then live and breathe in that space. That's how I kind of see event planning. Once I can actually dream about it, I know I'm fully in the planning mode. Know that you're there, attend events on that platform if you can, especially, if they're free or if you have a little budget, you'll get the attendee experience and start to really play around with it, and also chat with other organizers who maybe have used that platform. So that's where, again, event planners gather is a great place to be like, hey, has anyone used X, Y, And I've been fortunate enough to talk to fellow peers who've actually done, say, screen shares into what the back end looks like and how their setup worked, what they liked, what they didn't like. And so those are just some things to think about with virtual event planning. Virtual event platform selection.
That's super, huh? Wow. That's a really good, I'm going to go back and listen to that probably 3 or 4 times.
Well, great. We can, right? Time is now fluid. So.
Exactly. This is Inception. We're all good. And it's really interesting too, because it's almost like for the event planner, the kind of requirements you mentioned in RFP previously, and previously we were worried about the tech stack would have been, the size of the room, the ceiling height, capacities, the food and beverage. And it's kind of like all of those supporting services have just kind of moved over to the virtual world. So it's a different stack. I think looking at it that way is very interesting, because at the end of the day, you're kind of doing the same job with a new stack of services in order to accomplish this goal.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. And, even more interestingly, we're just on kind of the cutting edge and beginning time of virtual events. So as we saw, maybe there were some platforms out there that have been doing this. Certainly I want to give them credit, but at the same time, you see a lot of, especially event apps, that kind of were more broadly accepted than expanding their services and offerings to include virtual event streaming, especially, and kind of especially, instead of a mobile device, accommodating that to a laptop or a desktop format. And so I would actually just tell people to give it time. From my experience with the platforms that I've either used or demoed, everything is in the pipeline, so to speak, again, tech terms. But it is really important to know that they're rapidly developing. So I'm actually really excited for, in a couple months even, you're going to, different platforms that maybe you demoed and weren't so psyched on, do kind of stay on, have them stay on your radar, vice versa, because it's really exciting to see what's being developed, and, kind of in our in an economic way, people will try and stand out. And I think it's neat to see with that level of competition, what different platforms are going to create.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's still so new. I think some people feel like they've missed the boat, maybe, that I should have jumped on to this earlier. But it's really in its infancy, it feels like. And I think for those people, you should not lose hope or feel like you've missed, but you can still learn these things and jump in. It's not too late. And I guess that kind of leads into another question too, which is, I mean, for someone that that's nervous to begin the journey or to begin the learning or hasn't quite had the time or for whatever, I mean, there's so much going on. There's economic factors, there's health factors, there's socioeconomic factors, like you mentioned. There's so many reasons that people have been able to do things or not been able to do things. And I mean, what advice would you give somebody now to jump in, somebody that's ready to make that, or somebody that's still a little bit hesitant to do so?
Yeah, I would certainly say that, it's definitely still, the wave is still growing, right? I think of surfing terms, you have not missed the wave by any means. And, this is, as I mentioned before, it absolutely is a time where, we are pushed into areas that we've maybe never been in before. And again, being really honest and transparent about that. And we're, especially as event planners, there's actually two types of minds. So again, back into psychology, There's two types of mindsets. There's perfectionist mindset, which is like, oh, I should have done this. Oh, this didn't go according to plan, et cetera. So it's easy to judge ourselves and be critical. I'm just going to acknowledge, especially as women, we're under like societal pressure to be a certain way and make everything perfect. But if you put on kind of that different hat, that growth mindset hat, that's when you start to be like, great, I tried my best and this is what I learned from it. It's a really just healthy way to look at your own work, and you can use these two different mindsets on everything you do in life, actually. But I would say that this is a time where being vulnerable is all of a sudden, that authenticity helps build trust. And so you're seeing a lot of relationships really fortifying now. And so it's actually a really wonderful opportunity to and in the day of influencers and social media, right? Authenticity is this buzzword, but it's trending for a reason, because people want to know they're human. You're not a robot. You're not perfect. And just, Murphy's Law I mentioned earlier, like expect that things will go wrong, plan for them as best you can. Especially with tech, you do need a lot more contingencies in place because you're not necessarily there. One of the hardest things I found was producing an event where, someone's lost on site. You can find them in the hallway and be like, oh, let me help you get to where you're going. If someone's lost in the ether internet, you just hope they find their way. But so I think just coming at it with a positive attitude and making sure that your team is on board. You'll plan the best you can. You all are professionals, maybe listening to this, and having the understanding that if you're ever going to experiment, now absolutely is the time. So take advantage, fail, try again, set realistic expectations, both not only with your client, I actually do it with the audience. So certainly you never want to admit that like, hey guys, this is our first time doing this, but maybe you do. And you acknowledge that technology, no matter how intuitive it is, you've been looking at it longer than them. So giving your audience a second to catch up to speed and being like, hey, this is where the agenda is. Even though it's a giant word that says agenda, you kind of have to handhold a little bit more, as we've seen, and really educate the audience on how to be a good virtual audience.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's great advice. That's great advice. And like you said, the experimentation is so important. And I think, I could be wrong. Let's see what you think about this, but it feels like it's a little bit more accessible too. Somebody that wanted to start producing or experimenting with physical events, it may have been a little bit more difficult to do so. I mean, right now people are producing events on Zoom. They get a free account on Zoom, and you can do really small kind of introductory events and work your way up. And there's not a lot of, not the same sort of investment required to do so. And it's very easy to experiment in a virtual world for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think always start with your content, right? If your content is good, all the other, I always think of event planning in general, like get the cake right. Make it the most like delicious vanilla cake. And then all the frosting, all the decoration, like that's just, that's that level up. And that's great. But, if you have the most beautiful decoration and frosting, but really bad cake, it's not going to end well.
It doesn't matter.
So I really encourage people to think of it like that. And so just like you mentioned, anyone can do a virtual event. And if you have just really solid content, that's going to come through. The next thing I would encourage you to focus on, if you're going to do anything to level up your experience, is audio. If right now, I'm just going to show, I'm using a special little mic here. I see that you have your lapel mic, but that it's so fascinating to watch an event where, everything can even look good, but if the audio quality isn't great, that's actually why there's Zoom fatigue right now, is because the quality is a little bit lacking. So there's a reason that you binge watch Netflix or watch TV. It's because the quality of production is good. And so we can just take a little bit of lessons from, especially the TV world, and I've actually done this study with a friend. You can have, say, even like a kind of fuzzy image or not the best background or whatnot, but if it sounds okay, that's excellent. And actually then you can pull the audio and make a podcast out of it. So, there's a kind of win-win there. But that would just be my small experience or small kind of experiment I'd encourage you to do. In addition, I do want to comment on that access piece. I think it's really important to note, not only is it accessible more for the organizers, but actually also for the attendees. So people don't have those expenses of flights, of hotel rooms, of even maybe ticket costs are more affordable through virtual. And then also there's the environmental component. Think of that, right? Then you don't have it's so funny. I actually don't own a car. So in Portland, it's super bike friendly. So I always do my little carbon emissions calculator every year and everything's perfectly, under the norm and usual and doing really good until I get to flights, because I fly everywhere for work. And so the emissions through flights and air traffic is astronomical. And so think of the good we're doing environmentally by hosting events virtually. If that's a motivation, and if that's a value for you, your client, do think that, think about that and how virtual can affect the total kind of carbon emissions.
100%. I think that's a very important, I think it's hard to see the positive when so many people in the industry are suffering, because it's been a bit of an apocalypse for certain industries within the industry. And, but I think if you look for it, there can be silver linings like this, and the climate is a huge one. I think the carbon emissions is a great point. The accessibility and just being able to do this stuff from home. I don't think it'll ever 100% replace the value of seeing people. But I do think that the impact on the climate will certainly be a net positive for sure.
If anyone's worried that virtual is going to take over on-site events, let me quell your fears right now. Everyone is yearning for that connection. And there's a reason, right, why we even have the video framed as we do. The most impactful connections psychologically are actually shown to happen within 4 feet. So if you can create that mimicking, even right now, Jason, you seem like you're 4 feet away from me, even though you're thousands of miles away. So I think we definitely, we are social creatures. We yearn for those connections and that community. And there's so much you can translate through screen, but also, maybe you're missing out on some of the body language and just even the energy that you feel from a room. And so absolutely, I think, both are here to stay. And don't you worry if you're just hanging tight for, virtual is not your thing. I think there are safe ways to do on-site events. It is the event organizer's responsibility to keep people safe. So really take that seriously. And there are new protocol coming out through, say in America, the CDC or whatnot, to produce events. I've seen conferences already happening. I know hotel venues especially are taking it really seriously and working on capacity, traffic flow, et cetera, to support on-site events. Just, be careful out there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Now, kind of shifting a little bit, I just want to have a quick one about collaborations because, I find something like this so cool that, we met recently, we reached out to each other and found a way to collaborate. And I see this happening much more than before. Obviously, I think people were much more busy. People weren't at home as much, obviously. But I find it just fascinating that so many of us are meeting, even if it's through a screen. Are you experiencing the same thing? Has it been the same sort of feedback in the United States, and the same kind of people looking for other people in the industry and looking for support?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I don't know, if you and I are unique in that we're seeking it too. So definitely, you can't just sort of like sit back and wait for people to come to you. Right. Yeah. It's a two-way street. So, so there is that aspect, but definitely I think that people are, I'm such a strong believer that, all boats rise with the tide. And so, if you have a question about virtual events and haven't done it before, people who've done it are willing to share. And those that want to hold their cards close aren't going to receive the same benefit as that, kind of share economy and that collaboration that you might get from being vulnerable and supporting one another. So that's just the attitude I go into most things. But I think, potentially people might be bored, they've been at home, and when some, a stranger, so to speak, or kind of a peer they may not have known reaches out, it is exciting. And maybe that's the new person you talk to that day. So people do feel more accessible. This is just my opinion and perception. But just to give a small anecdote, I had met, a gentleman who worked with the USOPC, so the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, at an event that I had attended in Hachioji, Japan. And then we reconnected because I was like, hey, checking in on you. And this is a great opportunity also to reconnect with your network. I think, as simple as that statement, I'm not a big fan of how are you doing? I think that it's too loaded of a question these days.
Absolutely.
But if you can show that you care, and just say like, hey, checking in on you. This is what's up in my world, and would love to catch up. Something as simple as that I've seen really well received. And so I did that for this gentleman that I'd met. We ended up talking, and then he ends up introducing me to the events director with the USOPC. So you just never know where these connections are going to lead. Yeah. And so if you're kind of one of those natural networkers, now is a wonderful time where, I think we have this sense of we're in it together. I see this a lot with, fortunately or unfortunately, I've actually managed several events where there's been sort of these mini natural disasters. So at X Games Austin, there was, flash flooding and a lightning storm. At the Seco Black Master Series, a 55-foot climbing wall over 750,000 gallons of water pool. Wow. Then there's a lightning storm. So it's amazing in these states of crises or emergency, how people band together. You can see this if you're an outdoor enthusiast. Maybe you've gone on a hiking or backpacking or camping trip. And when the weather kind of turns, those I find are the most kind of like fun stories where people really did bond and sort of like just support one another. And so you're seeing that on a much grander scale. And so it's these, I'm sure there's a term for it. Me and my philosophy and psychology studies, but really it's just amazing that in a time of need, we are social creatures and we do support one another. And it's the people with kind of that attitude that are then going to thrive in the end, because, a golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. And when you need some help, ask for it. When you can give some help, give it. That's really important to remember too. And people are out there. LinkedIn is a great way to meet. That's how we met, Jason and I. And in addition, just exploring your network, maybe if you're seeking, especially a specific vendor, let's bring this back to events, just tapping your network and be like, hey, does anyone know an event technologist? I never thought I'd be asking for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are people out there, and there's also just wonderful, right now is an opportunity to be human, to be vulnerable, and to open up to people you may not have talked to that look different than you, think different than you. That diversity of thought is super important as well in the events that we produce. Definitely.
And I think what you said too is really important to kickstart that by having the courage to reach out in the first place too. Because these things, they usually will not just come to you. I think you've got to, it happens. We get lucky sometimes, but I think everything you said is so true, and kickstarting it, you have to be the person to put your foot on the gas a little bit.
Totally.
Before I let you go, I wanted to just talk about your background. Can we?
Oh, sure,
this is a bit off script, huh?
Yeah, no, great.
But we were like some best practices for backgrounds, because I really like your background, and it's something
my actual virtual event background. I'm thinking like, let me tell you my life story.
We can go into that on a separate episode for sure.
I'll be back with you guys. Stay tuned. Yeah,
exactly. But because so often I see you talked about audio, which is super important. And I totally agree. It's like you're asking somebody to pay attention for an hour. If they have to use any extra energy to pay attention because the audio is not there, you're going to lose them faster. And background is the same. Like there's so many times where I see camera levels, lightings. It's just, you're losing people, and it's something that's not that difficult to do. So maybe you could, before we sign off and before I let you go, kind of talk a little bit about good practices in the background.
Sure thing. Yeah. Quick steps about background from Chloe Mandell. Okay, let's do this. First and foremost, number one, make sure that your camera's eye level. It's going to make someone see as if you're looking into their eyes. Another thing that's actually really tough to do, and what I've been, working on, is talking into your camera. So right now I see Jason through my periphery, but I'm staring right at you into the camera. And if you're using an alternative source for your camera, some people are definitely noting that the built-in cameras into certain, say, laptops aren't up to snuff. And so, say your camera is then right above, like the actual lens you're using is right above your screen, you're going to actually want to look there. So that's number one. Number two, lighting. So lighting, I actually was using, it's so funny, these little kind of LED lights, but you'll notice that I turned them off because I'm going to give you even something to think about, is time of day. So we started talking in the morning. It was 8 a.m. here in Portland, Pacific Standard Time, and the sun actually hadn't fully come up. And so you'll notice maybe throughout this talk, if you're paying attention, it actually got brighter. So accommodating. So if you're going to be talking, for example, when it's getting darker, you probably actually want to close your window and not rely on that light source and build in another light source. These LED lights and whatnot, they're so cheap these days. They're no longer sold out. They were at the beginning. Influencers use them all the time. Ring lights, you can get them for like $20-$30. So US dollars. But just making sure, what light sources do I have on right now? I have my dining room light. Even in the back, you'll notice that I put on a light there, just so you want to make sure you're not backlit though. So say you're in front of a window, that's really maybe not the best, but right now, Jason, I can comment yes, you have that back sliding door. It's not, taking away from the experience. I see you have a light on to your right or left. And so use the light sources that you have. You don't need to spend a ton. Next, think about composition. So there is this thing in photography and also videography for rule of thirds. Right now, I'm not actually doing the best job at how I've positioned my screen, but you can kind of see the plant is roughly 2/3. And then I have my living room as another third. and I happen to be in the center. Sometimes it's nice actually if you're a little bit off to one side or not. But do think about what is directly behind you. So maybe like pick up a couple things, make sure, again, I love how you put it, Jason, whatever is going to distract them from the content, make sure you can eliminate that the best you can. Maybe you have a giant TV behind you, throw up a sheet or a pretty blanket or whatnot. Make sure, you know, if your books are kind of haphazardly situated, you know, maybe kind of file them nicely.
Organize them. So
little things that you can do, organizing them, little things you can do to support your background just to make it, you know, as clean as possible. Then again, I wouldn't think what's actually really neat is that you can do a blank wall. That's fine. What you're missing if you do that is lack of character. So let's actually do a quick little study right now.
Yeah.
So right now I could do this blank wall, but you don't get a sense as much of who I am and what I'm into design. I'm kind of this creative. I like plants. So all of a sudden, just by turning the camera, boom, you get kind of this really neat, this neat frame and into my life. And right now is really a special time because we do get that like little window into people's lives. What does your home look like? You know, maybe your pet comes up and like, that's really special experience to share. And we don't often get that in normal lives even. Maybe your kids come, you know, I think that's where we talked about those connections happening. And a lot of those connections happen because we're videoing in from our home. And so don't discredit that it's, you know, oh, it's a mistake or it's imperfect. If anything, that imperfection is what's going to make it more kind of relatable. And I would encourage everyone to just think conscientiously around, we talked about framing, how close you are to the camera, where you're looking, and your lighting.
Nice. Perfect. 100%. I think with a little bit of thought and a little bit of effort, you can totally change the experience. That was an awesome example, just moving sideways like this. Exact same room, exact same setup, but a totally different background. And it totally changes the experience that people are going to have watching the video screen. Amazing. That has been really, really awesome. I've enjoyed this a lot, great. Chloe. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for, thank you, Jason.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for dropping a ton of knowledge. I think this is going to be one that's rewatchable. So yeah, I'll throw this up soon. We'll put all the show notes, the links that you've talked about, some of the products, the resources that you've talked about. And thank you so much. This has been great. I hope that we can get to do it again.
Yeah, no, I would love that. And if anyone has any questions from this, feel free to reach me on Instagram at Mandell Experiences. Perfect. That's Mandell with 2 L's. And I would be happy to answer any questions you have and continue to be a resource for you all.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll share all of the connection details too on the website as well, so they can get in touch with you by email, by phone, by whatever it is. But we'll find a way. But this has been amazing. There's so much value here, so I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, excellent! I'm so glad. Yeah, definitely. Good luck, everyone out there.
Cool. All right.
You got this. Yeah.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. This has been Breakouts with me, your host, Jason Greenman. If you like what you've seen or heard, please subscribe, follow our channels, and if you have a minute, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.